Yesterday, the White House Government Transparency Task Force released nearly 150 pages of top-secret FBI files. In this batch of files, there are two operation code names. One is called Rusty Thumbs, which was a code name given to a Chinese woman. The FBI once tried to develop her into an unwitting double agent. The second one is called Freshman 15, a code name for a criminal case with a touch of dark American humor aimed at gathering enough evidence to indict and arrest a current U.S. congressman, as well as that woman. Both of these code names point to the same woman, whose name is Fang Fang. A few years ago, the political sex scandal involving Congressman Eric Swalwell and Fang Fang caused quite a stir, but behind the scenes, the FBI had not only been tracking Fang Fang for a long time, but had also launched an extremely dangerous sting and recruitment operation against her. A secret resume of Fang Fang was leaked as a result. She once served as a flight attendant on the Chinese president's private jet and claimed that her connections in China were comparable to those of the red nobility families. So how did the FBI discover her and attempt to lure her? Did she sell intelligence from the CCP to the United States? What other unknown secrets are there regarding her romantic relationship with Swalwell? All of this, well, it starts back in May 2013 in Las Vegas. Bobby Smith was an FBI undercover agent, and his cover identity at the time was a risk consultant for a multinational consulting firm. He was looking for an assistant with a Chinese background to help him understand China's political and business environment and to expand his business. More importantly, this person had to have extensive connections within local city governments throughout the Bay Area. And these three things were tailor-made for Fang Fang. Bobby and Fang Fang's first meeting was scheduled at a hotel coffee shop in Las Vegas. For Fang Fang, this was a job interview for a high-paying consulting position. For Bobby, this was the first day of evaluating whether Fang Fang could become an FBI double agent. Bobby's impression of Fang Fang was conflicted. She was vague about her past. She never clearly stated where she went for her undergraduate studies, and when the conversation turned to her parents' positions in the government, she refused to elaborate, only repeatedly emphasizing that they were about to retire. However, the intelligence Bobby already had in his hands was quite comprehensive. The FBI first took notice of Fang Fang when she began having contact with another person who was already under FBI surveillance. Following the trail, the FBI discovered that Fang Fang had a daily contact within the Chinese consulate in San Francisco, a Chinese Ministry of State Security intelligence officer operating under the cover of a diplomat. Digging deeper, they uncovered that Fang Fang's parents held positions within the Chinese Ministry of State Security. At that time, the FBI had two paths before them. The first was to confront her directly, issue a warning, scare her off, or deport her. The second path was to play along, quietly containing her to see if they could flip her and turn her into a double agent for the United States. The FBI chose the second path. Why? As stated in the files, Fang Fang's clear connections with state security personnel and the Chinese government, combined with her ongoing contact with U.S. officials, gave her unique value for reporting back on the Ministry of State Security's influence operations against the United States. In other words, the very part of her that was most dangerous was exactly what the U.S. considered most valuable. And so, the undercover agent Bobby made his entrance. During that interview in Las Vegas, Fang Fang's answers to professional questions about business consulting were mediocre, and she even seemed a bit distracted. But when the topic turned to American politics, her eyes instantly lit up. She excitedly boasted to Bobby about her achievements in the Bay Area. She talked about which city mayors she knew, how she attended private dinners for congressmen, how she helped an up-and-coming congressman raise campaign funds, provided interns, and so on and so forth. Looking at this Chinese international student before him, who showed such immense passion for power and politics, Bobby nodded with a smile, though a flicker of doubt crossed his mind. How could a deep-cover national security agent, upon meeting someone for the first time, brag about shady gray area operations like soliciting illegal political contributions as if they were some kind of asset? Was she genuinely naive, or was she just playing dumb? And it took Bobby nearly a year to find the answer to that question, and the price for uncovering it was the entire counter-espionage operation. Friends, pay attention to this detail and this question. By the end of today's episode, you'll find that the truth is terrifying when you really think about it. Their second meeting took place in San Francisco, on an evening 1 month later. Rusty Thumb Fang Fang arrived for the appointment right on time, and Bobby wrote in his report that her attire that day was almost businesslike, appearing much more professional than when they first met in Las Vegas. She opened the menu and ordered the most expensive dish. During dinner that night, Fang Fang said two surprising things. The first was when she talked about her ambitions and social capital. She said that if she wanted to, she could easily use her sexual charm to conquer those politicians because she was young and beautiful. She even added that she had the opportunity to marry into a wealthy family back in Beijing, but she refused, saying she wanted to forge her own path. Next, she began to show off her connections in a high-profile way, claiming that she had sung for high-ranking CCP officials when she was a child, and that her connections in China were comparable to those of members of Red families, even including relatives of Mao Zedong. The second point was when she discussed how CCP intelligence agencies deal with officials. She commented that the Ministry of State Security would hire prostitutes rather than directly sending a state security officer to seduce those officials. Bobby wrote these two sentences down in his notes word for word. In the motive column, he wrote, "Money and power." Note, rusty thumb, highly social, but exhibits extreme narcissistic traits and self-centeredness, which may affect her suitability as an intelligence source. And at the same time as this dinner, Fang Fang was doing something else, something Bobby was completely unaware of. Fortunately, 10 days later, Fang Fang signed a contractor agreement. The first party was a consulting firm set up by the FBI, which required her to complete political tasks and provide professional advice on cultural matters. Fang Fang thought she had landed a high-paying, cushy job, little knowing that she had already stepped halfway into a trap set by the FBI. To complete the process, Bobby asked her to submit a resume, and the information in it shocked all the agents. Between 2002 and 2009, a 7-year period, Fang Fang worked for Air China and served on special flight missions for the top leaders of the Chinese Communist Party multiple times. China does not have a dedicated presidential aircraft like the United States. When CCP leaders travel abroad, they use a Boeing 747-400 passenger jet from Air China with the tail number B2472. This aircraft normally operates on regular commercial routes, and it is only taken over by the Air Force and temporarily retrofitted 20 days before a leader's state visit. The flight crew is then meticulously rescreened by the protocol department of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and the airline. This aircraft, B2472, served from the era of Jiang Zemin through to Hu Jintao, and between 2008 and 2009, then Vice President Xi Jinping also used it extensively for state visits. This is the Chinese version of Air Force One. But that's not the most important part. The key is that under the CCP system, the flight crew chosen to serve on such a leader's special aircraft is absolutely not randomly selected from a roster. Before every mission, all personnel undergo rigorous political vetting, background checks on their family, and organizational verification. This is by no means a position you can get just by being good-looking. It is a special role that requires absolute political trustworthiness. It is even more likely that the flight attendants on the special aircraft are, in themselves, swallows who have undergone special agent training, much like the waitresses who serve tea and pour water at the Zhongnanhai state banquets that we discussed in this episode. For those who missed that episode, you're welcome to go watch it. Once you've seen it, you'll understand what kind of level that requires. After signing the contract and submitting her resume, Fang Fang began dealing with the FBI. However, just as the FBI was preparing to play the long game to catch a big fish, things started to take a sharp turn in a direction no one had anticipated. After signing the contract, Fang Fang's reticence regarding the details of CCP intelligence caught the FBI off guard. She remained tight-lipped. She was evasive about her parents' workplace and refused to elaborate on how exactly she had built her network of connections back in China. And when it came to the influence operations of the CCP's Ministry of State Security in the US that the FBI was interested in, she was evasive. But she couldn't help herself at all. She just had to talk about something else entirely. She kept bragging about her political maneuvering in California, describing how she introduced donors one by one to a congressman named Swoboda, how she arranged dinners, and how those funds were funneled into the books. Bobby noted in the file that while she went to great lengths to avoid discussing internal CCP information, she was completely forthcoming about her operations to solicit political contributions for Swoboda. At this point, Bobby's undercover operations suffered a major blow. To understand what this blow was and how significant it was, we need to open up another thread and look at the kind of web Fang Fang had woven in California over the past 2 years. In 2011, Fang Fang, then in her early 30s, arrived in the United States on an F1 visa and enrolled at California State University, East Bay. The major she chose was hospitality management. This meant that under US law, she had no way to work legally at all. A woman pushing 30, squeezed into an ordinary state university, mingling with a bunch of 18 or 19-year-old undergraduates, she looked out of place no matter how you saw it. But she quickly did something clever. She seized the political shell. She managed to secure 2 titles in one fell swoop, president of the university's Chinese Students and Scholars Association and president of the campus chapter of the Asian Pacific Islander American Public Affairs Association. APAPA is a highly influential and legitimate Asian American civic organization in the Bay Area. These 2 titles gave Fang Fang something that is very hard to buy in American politics, especially for someone like her who isn't an American citizen, a legitimate and repeatable reason to have access to politicians. Those who knew her recall that she ran the organizations with great success, hosting one political and business event after another, which not only made the groups popular, but also thrust her into the spotlight. She organized Chinese international students to serve as free volunteers, helping set up stages, put up posters, and handle reception duties for fundraising galas for various politicians. For politicians in desperate need of fundraising and free labor, this was practically a free lunch falling from the sky. And for Fang Fang, this was a ticket that gave her unlimited access to California politics. From 2013 to 2015, her influence in Bay Area politics rose almost vertically. In the words of several people who knew her, Fang Fang was everywhere during those years. In photos, she stood prominently in the center, surrounded by members of Congress like R.O. Khanna, Judy Chu, and Mike Honda, as well as a large number of Bay Area mayors and state legislators. However, behind this glamorous political network, there were turbulent undercurrents. FBI electronic surveillance and files from Peru indicate that for at least 3 years, Fang Fang had sexual relationships with at least 2 mayors of cities in the American Midwest. And at the very top of this list of prey was a name that was on the rise at the time, Eric Swalwell. How did Fang Fang hook up with Swalwell? In the declassified files, there are 2 versions. One version is that in the autumn of 2012, at an awards banquet for the Chinese American community, the 2 were coincidentally seated at the same table. The other version is that it was at a campaign rally for Swalwell's first run for Congress in 2012. That year, Swalwell was 32 years old and was the most promising rising star in California politics. Fang Fang was also 32, but she was playing the role of a student who appeared much younger. In later inquiries, Swalwell described her as an extremely striking person who was completely at ease in social settings crowded with high-ranking officials. The 2 had only known each other for 2 weeks before they met for drinks at a bar. In the years that followed, they maintained a subtle relationship with multiple instances of physical contact, but they never went on public dates and were certainly not boyfriend and girlfriend. Swalwell described in later inquiries that the last time they had sexual relations was in March 2015. He said that from beginning to end, he viewed this relationship as a casual, mutually beneficial pastime, but he could clearly sense that Fang Fang always wanted to take it further and get him hooked. The resume documents also recorded a detail with very strong visual imagery. Before Swalwell was officially elected to Congress, Fang Fang visited his private apartment late at night on 2 separate occasions. One night, Fang Fang suddenly appeared outside his apartment door and started frantically knocking and pounding on it. Subsequently, one of Swalwell's aides, whose name was redacted and who was likely a secretary, couldn't handle the scene she was making and opened the door to let her in. After she entered the apartment, she had a sexual relationship with Swalwell. A few hours later, she left. In subsequent inquiries, Swalwell, in an attempt to clear his name, claimed that Fang Fang was just an ordinary liaison sent by APA to coordinate with his campaign team. In the Bay Area, every organization sends someone to coordinate with my campaign team, and the only difference between Fang Fang and those other ordinary liaisons is that I slept with her and she was interested in me. However, this Chinese international student who Swalwell claimed was just interested in him wasted no time in doing 3 things after she made contact with him. First, infiltration, sending people into Congress. Swalwell claimed that all internship applications were handled by his staff, but he admitted that Fang Fang was special to him, and anyone she recommended was labeled as an outstanding youth from the Asian community. As a result, an intern recommended by Fang Fang entered Swalwell's congressional office in Washington. Another volunteer she recommended stayed in the campaign office for about 18 months. The second thing was the secret passage tactic, playing with illegal campaign cash. As a foreign student, Fang Fang could not donate directly, so she took another route, finding intermediaries to donate and then reimbursing them afterward. In the autumn of 2014, she invited a winery owner to attend a fundraiser for Swalwell, bluntly telling him, "Just bring your checkbook to write a check and I'll reimburse you afterward." In September 2013, a tycoon who owned dozens of restaurant and hotel chains held a re-election fundraiser for Swalwell at his mansion. Fang Fang not only attended, but also privately asked the tycoon if he could count his donation as her own. We will mention these two figures again later. They have more of a role to play. Friends, keep listening. Now, the third thing was packaging yourself to become a political fundraiser. In the ecosystem of American political fundraising, how much money you can bring in determines your status in the eyes of politicians. Through these two tactics, Fang Fang quickly packaged herself into a key fundraiser capable of providing a steady stream of support for Swalwell. FBI files later determined that between 2013 and 2014, she used intermediaries at least 4 times to conceal foreign funds and illegally inject money into Swalwell's campaign coffers. When Fang Fang boasted about these detailed cash transactions one by one, the undercover agent Bobby just felt a headache coming on. Why? Because he was originally carrying out a long-term counterintelligence mission. He was after the decision-making chain and intelligence network of the Chinese Ministry of State Security. But what Fang Fang fed him was a genuine criminal indictment involving federal political campaign funds. Under U.S. federal law, foreign nationals making donations to members of Congress through straw donors, where the money is reimbursed after the fact, is known legally as a straw donor scheme, which is an extremely serious federal felony. Suddenly, Bobby found himself in a dilemma. On one side was the counter-espionage recruitment case that his superiors valued highly and were evaluating for the long term, the double-agent recruitment program. And on the other side was the criminal case of election fraud, with solid evidence provided by Fang Fang herself, right under his nose. Within the FBI's case handling mechanism, although the counter-espionage case had a higher security classification, once it involved a criminal offense by a sitting member of Congress, the priority of the criminal investigation would become higher, overriding the counter-espionage case that was still in the evaluation phase. If he reported this information exactly as it was, the recruitment operation, which was originally intended to play the long game to catch a big fish, would very likely be forced to give way. He had no choice. He had to report it truthfully. As it turned out, that was indeed the case. The operation to recruit the double agent was quickly called off. 6 days later, the FBI officially opened a case and began investigating the political campaign finance activities. The case was codenamed Freshman 15. The codename itself is a bit of an inside joke, referring to the 15 pounds that college freshmen often gain during their first year due to the abundance of food. The codename mocks that newly elected congressman who had just stepped onto Capitol Hill in Washington, implying that after only 1 year in the political inner circle, he had already been fattened up. With the approval of the criminal case codenamed Freshman 15, the FBI's Criminal Investigative Division officially took the lead. Wiretap warrants were quickly issued, and Fang Fang's mobile phone calls, encrypted emails, and the campaign team's financial transactions were all exposed to the FBI's electronic surveillance array. It took the FBI nearly 3 years to figure out one thing: exactly how Fang Fang's money was moving. In this file, there was a table with 10 transactions. The names were all blacked out, leaving only the amounts and dates. Most of them were figures like $49,985. In the sensitive thresholds for monitoring in the United States, these are usually set at round numbers like $50,000 or $10,000. So this frequently appearing $49,985, which is $15 short of $50,000, wasn't a coincidence. It was a tactic. In English, this is called structuring, breaking down large sums into smaller ones to skirt the reporting threshold. Logically speaking, Fang Fang should have been quite wealthy. In the newly declassified files, copies of her Citibank checks were often for $60,000, and her account balance even exceeded $150,000 at one point. But strangely, in the eyes of her acquaintances, her actual financial situation remained a huge mystery. The winery owner we mentioned earlier, who knew her well, revealed that she drove a Mercedes-Benz, but because she was a foreign national with no credit history, she couldn't lease the car herself, so he co-signed for her. He also co-signed her apartment lease. She owned at least 1, possibly 2, properties in Beijing. He said that if those properties were rented out, they might be enough to cover her living expenses. However, Fang Fang had expensive taste in fashion. She usually bought luxury goods, which required a lot more money. Another restaurant chain tycoon who owned about 50 Burger Kings and gas station hotels told the FBI that Fang Fang claimed she was living off the money she had saved from working as a flight attendant for Air China for 8 to 10 years. However, the tycoon found it very strange. Although this young woman drove a luxury car, she was always stingy with money and even had to ask him to borrow money for gas several times. You see, someone who drives a Mercedes, owns property in Beijing, makes large political donations to politicians, and has checks for $60,000 flowing through her account actually has to ask others to borrow money for gas. This brings up the biggest question regarding Fang Fang's identity. If she were the descendant of a high-ranking CCP official, how could she possibly be reduced to such a predicament that she couldn't even afford gas money? Or is it more likely that she is a woman from an ordinary background who exaggerated her so-called red connections, and in reality is just a swallow trained for money and power? Friends, which possibility do you think is more likely? If you believe she comes from a top-tier red second-generation or official background and personally engaged in high-level infiltration, type A. If you think she likely comes from an ordinary background, relied on packaging her identity to gain benefits, and is essentially a swallow, type B. Let's see what most of you choose. There is another possibility. This is a carefully crafted double narrative, a two-faced persona. She disguised all the illegal funds as payments for dresses, a few $100 advanced, short-term tuition loans between friends, or rent guaranteed privately. For example, that winery owner, after being investigated by the FBI, explained it point by point. The $20,000 plus transferred by Fang Fang in April 2014 was for a Mercedes lease, and the $20,000 in December 2014 was money originally lent to him for tuition that Fang Fang later paid back. That's how it was done, making political contributions through the hands of friends with US status, and then having Fang Fang mask them as payments for dresses or tuition. This kind of operation caused huge trouble for the FBI. They monitored her for 3 years, and while they knew full well that Fang Fang was laundering money for infiltration, because she never made donations herself, the FBI only had a pile of circumstantial evidence that wouldn't hold up in court. They couldn't get the hard, direct evidence of Fang Fang personally orchestrating illegal campaign contributions. However, before the FBI could get to the bottom of it, the situation took an unexpected and sharp turn in 2015. That year, thanks to his impressive political resume, Swalwell successfully squeezed his way into the House Intelligence Committee, one of the most powerful and highly classified bodies in the US government, which meant he would start gaining access to top-tier US national security secrets. At that point, the FBI could no longer sit still. A woman suspected of being funded by the Chinese Ministry of State Security was not only having a physical relationship with his congressman, but was also continuously sending interns and soliciting donations for his political team. If she were allowed to continue infiltrating, the consequences would be unimaginable. Consequently, a criminal investigation procedure was rapidly initiated. From the night of April 27th to the early morning of April 28th, 2015, the FBI searched Fang Fang's residence. At the end of that month, the FBI gives Swalwell himself a defensive briefing, which is a standard procedure in counterintelligence, essentially telling this public official that he was being infiltrated by a foreign intelligence agency and should immediately cut off all contact. A few days later, Swalwell sat down in the FBI's Oakland field office and disclosed all his interactions with Fang Fang. And just as he was answering these questions in Oakland, that woman was already packing her bags. On June 2nd, 2015, the FBI knocked on the door of that fast food tycoon. Later that same day, the tycoon received an email from Fang Fang saying she had to return to China to handle an urgent situation, but promised she would eventually return to the United States. Late that night, on the eve of her departure, Fang Fang reached out to a winery owner she knew well, saying she was returning to China soon and asking the owner to cover her June rent and find someone to take over the remaining year of her Mercedes lease. She said she had already been approached by the FBI and expected them to come looking for her soon. She told the owner that the core of the agent's questioning was about Swalwell's campaign funds. Then she revealed a secret she had never mentioned to anyone before. She said her parents had once worked for a department within the Chinese Communist government similar to the US Secret Service. She didn't disclose her parents' specific positions, just casually added that her mother's rank was even higher than her father's. The winery owner later recalled to the FBI that he had indeed had a gut feeling over the past few years that Fang Fang was a covert CCP spy because she would often disappear for no reason. But at the same time, he found it strange, because sometimes the things she did were just too high profile and not very smart. That was the last time the owner saw Fang Fang. The last message he received was that she had arrived in Hong Kong. There was no further goodbye, and no assets were left tidied up. This Chinese woman, who had been navigating California politics for several years, just vanished like that. On October 16, 2015, the secret operation, codenamed Coat New Life 15 Pounds, was officially terminated. The ultimate goal of obtaining sufficient evidence and arresting Fang Fang and Swalwell fell through. Why couldn't they catch Fang Fang? Because she was extremely sharp. After realizing that Bobby, the consulting firm manager who recruited her, was likely a government undercover agent, she decisively cut off all contact and flew back to China overnight, just before the US operation was set to close in. For someone who has already left the country and cannot be extradited, the US judicial system has absolutely no way to hold a trial, let alone carry out an arrest. So why couldn't they prosecute Swalwell? Because under US law, to prosecute a sitting member of Congress, you must obtain ironclad evidence of subjective intent and a quid pro quo. That is, you must prove that the congressman knew the funds were illegal and explicitly agreed to trade public power for that money. And the FBI investigated for 3 years without obtaining ironclad evidence that Fang Fang directly handled the illicit cash. As Swalwell joined the House Intelligence Committee, the FBI's defensive briefing, which had alerted the target, became Swalwell's perfect safe haven. After receiving the warning, Swalwell simply went with the flow, playing the part of an unwitting victim. He immediately cut ties with Fang Fang, returned the funds, and cooperated fully with the investigation. This shrewd tactic of full cooperation and swift distancing not only cut off the possibility of any subsequent criminal liability, but also legally cemented his clean slate based on his lack of knowledge. On February 8, 2017, Congressman Swalwell's name was removed from the case title because the conclusion of the investigation was that no evidence was found of Swalwell committing any violations of federal corruption laws, though it did find that Fang Fang had committed violations of campaign finance laws. Consequently, the case was renamed the Christine Fang election law case. However, 3 months later, because Fang Fang had already fled, the case had to be closed. The closing letter was sent to the Department of Justice, where it was filed away and sat for 9 full years until it was declassified and made public yesterday. This story was not made public until it was declassified yesterday. And that brings us to the end of this story. Finally, I'd like to ask you all a question. When the FBI first approached Fang Fang in the name of counter-espionage, not only did she not shy away, but she actually bragged about the political donations she had secured for American politicians. Do you think this was just her habit of being high profile, or was it a desperate attempt to save herself after realizing the danger she was in? After all, once you're labeled a spy or a threat to national security, that's a serious felony that's incredibly hard to escape. If she proactively reframed the situation as a matter of political donations, she could exploit the loophole in US law where gray area donations are extremely difficult to prosecute, potentially allowing her to break free from what was already a dead-end situation. Friends, which possibility do you think is more likely? If you think this was a calculated move for self-preservation, type self-preservation for me. If you think this was just her habitual high-profile behavior and the final outcome of her slipping away was just a coincidence, type coincidence for me. Let's see what you choose. Alright, that's all for today. Today's story was quite long. Did you enjoy it, friends? If you enjoyed it, don't forget to give me a like before you leave. New friends, welcome to subscribe to Zhen Guandian. Don't forget about the hype feature for fans. It helps my videos reach further and wider. You're also welcome to forward and share my videos with friends you think might be interested. Zhen Fei would like to thank you all in advance. Alright, thank you all for watching. Don't forget, we'll see you again at the same time this Thursday on Zhen Guandian. Bye-bye.